On my third night, I realized the cameras were showing me something that wasn't happening in real time. At first, I thought it was a buffering issue, a lag, old wiring, cheap equipment. That's what I told myself, while I watched the monitor display a version of the warehouse floor where I was still standing at my desk, even though I had already walked away. I'm posting this anonymously because I still work security, just not there anymore, and I don't really know what I would call what happened. Glitch, hallucination, stress. All I know is that the footage didn't match reality, and it didn't stop when I left. The warehouse sat about 20 minutes outside a small Midwestern town most people only pass through. Flat fields, 2 gas stations, a diner that closes at 8. The warehouse was older than it looked, low concrete structure, metal roof, no signage except a faded company logo on the side. It stored agricultural equipment parts and off-season machinery. Nothing glamorous, nothing valuable enough to justify paranoia. But they still wanted overnight security. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., alone. In winter, that stretch of road was nearly invisible under snowdrifts. Some nights, the wind would erase my tire tracks before I even reached the highway. The job was mostly routine. Sit in the security office near the front entrance, monitor 12 cameras, log hourly patrols, check that the loading bay doors stayed locked. The office was small. 1 desk, a rolling chair that leaned slightly left, a coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned in years. The monitor setup was mounted on the wall 4 screens displaying split feeds from around the building. The loading docks, interior storage aisles, exterior lot, break room, maintenance hallway. The first 2 nights were uneventful. Snow tapping at the metal roof, heating system clicking on and off. The usual loneliness that creeps in around 2 a.m. On the third night, the storm was worse than usual. Visibility close to 0. I remember checking the exterior camera and seeing nothing but white static. Around 12:17 a.m., I stood up to do my first patrol. The routine was simple. Walk the main floor, check the side exits, test the loading bay handles, confirm the back maintenance door was locked. It took maybe 15 minutes. When I returned to the office, I glanced up at the monitors before sitting down and saw myself still standing there. Not a recording, not a playback window, the live feed. Camera 3, the one positioned in the upper corner of the security office, showed me at the desk, leaning forward slightly. But I was in the doorway, halfway into the room. For about 2 seconds, my brain refused to process it. Then the image on the screen shifted. The me on the monitor straightened up, adjusted the chair, and walked out of frame toward the hallway. I was still standing there in the doorway. I remember laughing, a short, nervous sound. "Okay," I said out loud, like someone might be listening. "Delay." I walked directly beneath camera 3 and looked up. The red light was steady. No flicker. Back at the monitors, the feed now showed the empty office. I checked the timestamp in the lower right corner. 12 hours, 19 minutes, and 42 seconds a.m. My watch read 12:21, a 2-minute delay. Annoying but explainable. The system was old. Still, I made a note in the logbook. Camera 3 latency approx 2 minutes. That's how it started. Over the next hour, I paid more attention to the feeds. The delay seemed inconsistent. Sometimes it was a minute, sometimes only a few seconds. Once, camera 7, the one covering the loading bay, displayed the large overhead door, partially open. My stomach tightened. I was certain I had checked that door during patrol. I zoomed in on the feed. Snow blew through the opening, swirling across the concrete floor. I stood up immediately and walked the long aisle toward the bay. The door was fully closed. No snow inside, no draft, no sound of wind forcing its way through. When I returned to the office, the monitor showed the door shut. Time stamp, 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 11 seconds a.m. My watch, 1:07. The gap was widening. I told myself the system probably recorded locally before streaming to the monitors. Maybe weather interference was affecting the signal. It made sense in a technical way. But then the pattern began. At 2:14 a.m., camera 5 covering the central storage aisle showed movement between the shelves. Not dramatic, just a shift in shadow, like someone stepping briefly into frame and then back out. I rewound the feed. Nothing. I waited. At 2:17, the shadow moved again, this time clearer. A thin vertical shape crossing from one aisle to the next. I leaned closer to the screen. The timestamp read 2:12, 5 minutes behind, and whatever had moved hadn't happened yet. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the warehouse floor. The air inside always felt colder after midnight, even with the heaters running. The metal shelving stretched high above, stacked with crates and plastic-wrapped equipment. My boots echoed more than usual. I reached the central aisle. Stillness. Then, somewhere deeper in the building, a metallic sound like something lightly brushing against a pipe. I froze. It could have been the heating system, expansion in the cold, but the timing felt wrong. Slowly, I walked down the aisle where I had seen the shadow on the monitor. I tried to match my position to what I'd seen on screen. Nothing moved. When I returned to the office, camera 5 now displayed me standing in the aisle, flashlight in hand. The timestamp read 2:16. I was watching myself from 4 minutes ago, except something was different. In the footage, just before I turned back toward the office, the camera caught movement behind me. A figure stepping out from the adjacent row of shelves. Tall, indistinct, just at the edge of frame. I hadn't seen anyone. In the footage, the figure stopped as soon as I turned. I rewound. The system glitched, skipping backward 10 seconds instead of 5. The figure appeared closer this time. Or maybe the angle had changed. When I looked up at the real aisle through the office doorway, it was empty. By 3 a.m., I wasn't thinking about delays anymore. The timestamp started behaving strangely. Camera 3 displayed 3:07 a.m. Camera 5 displayed 3:02. Camera 8 exterior north lot showed 2:58. None matched my watch. And then camera 3 showed something that made my chest tighten. It showed me sitting at the desk, head down, not moving, but I was standing. I was very much awake, staring at the monitor. The version of me on screen slowly lifted its head and looked directly at the camera. I wasn't doing that. On screen, my expression was blank, too still. My eyes slightly unfocused, like someone listening to a distant sound. Then the on-screen me stood up and walked toward the hallway. I didn't move. The timestamp read 3:11 a.m. My watch, 3:06. 5 minutes ahead now. The cameras weren't behind. They were showing what was about to happen. I don't remember deciding to follow it. But I left the office and walked down the hallway exactly the way the footage showed. I told myself I was proving something, that if I changed my movement, the feed would change too. Halfway down the corridor, I stopped. If the monitors were ahead of me, Then in 5 minutes they would show me standing there. Unless I didn't. I turned around and went back to the office. Camera 3 showed the hallway. Empty. Timestamp 3:12. I waited. At 3:16 the hallway feed flickered, and there I was walking down it. Even though I was sitting at the desk, on screen I reached the midpoint, stopped, turned slowly toward the camera. Then the feed distorted. Horizontal lines tearing across the image. The timestamp numbers flickering between 3:16 and 3:44 and 2:59. When the image stabilized, the hallway was empty again. I checked the real hallway, also empty. That's when the anomaly became personal. At 4:02 a.m., camera 3 displayed the office. The door behind the desk was open. I never left it open. In the footage, snow blew across the threshold. But the office didn't have an exterior door. On screen, the door led into darkness, not the hallway. The version of me entered the room from that darkness, covered in snow, slow steps, wet footprints forming on the carpet. Amy walked to the desk and leaned close to the camera, close enough that the image filled with my face. My lips moved. There was no audio feed, but I could read them. Don't stay. The timestamp read 4:09 a.m. My watch, 4:03. I stood up so quickly the chair tipped over. Behind me, the office door creaked. I turned. It was closed, locked, no snow, no footprints, but the air felt colder. That was when I remembered something the day supervisor had mentioned casually during training. The warehouse wasn't originally built for storage. It had been a manufacturing facility decades ago. There had been an accident and equipment malfunction during a winter storm. A night worker got locked out on the loading dock when the door mechanism froze. Security at the time assumed he'd left early. They didn't review the footage until morning. By then, he'd frozen to death against the exterior wall. The supervisor had laughed when he told it. Different times, he'd said. Different systems. I checked the building records and the file cabinet. The incident had happened in January. Overnight shift. Snowstorm conditions. Cameras malfunctioning due to weather interference. The guard on duty had reported timestamp irregularities in the hours before the accident. He'd written in his log, cameras not sensed, seeing reflections that aren't there. His name was Daniel Harper. Mine is Daniel Hayes. I didn't finish the shift. At 4:30 a.m., the monitors showed the exterior north lot. A single figure standing near the fence line, barely visible in the snow. Timestamp 4:35. I knew I had 5 minutes. I grabbed my keys and left the office. I didn't look back at the screens. As I drove down the access road, snow swallowing my headlights, I checked the rearview mirror. For a moment, just a second, I thought I saw someone standing in the road behind me. Still, watching. I quit the next day. They didn't argue. Just said they'd had technical issues before. Sometimes when I wake up in the middle of the night, I see the glow of monitors that aren't there. And I wonder if somewhere 5 minutes from now, another version of me is already standing in a dark hallway, listening to something moving just out of sight.